we would like to, with all our deep gratitude, thank all those who actually gave us appreciative words and feedback on the previous version of the economic survey, which we've tried to incorporate to work even harder for this one. The theme for this year's economic survey is wealth creation. On the 15th of August, the Honorable Prime Minister spoke about wealth creation and mentioned that wealth creators need to be respected because wealth cannot be distributed unless it is created. The Honorable Finance Minister also insists that those who create wealth are indeed India's wealth. Inspired by these ideas, this year's economic survey, the theme is wealth creation. The cover of the economic survey, which is lavender, captures the 100 rupee new note, which is in this color, and combines the old with the new. The rupee symbol also captures the same theme about wealth. You have, so that is indeed the color as Sanjeev is showing, the Principal Economic Advisor. The economic survey, as I will explain in detail, is a synthesis of the ideas of old and new. As I just mentioned, the lavender color captures basically the new 100 rupee note together with the old note, which has been around for very long. And in terms of the ideas, the economic survey combines contemporary evidence that I'll share with ancient ideas. And therefore, it's a synthesis of the old and the new. But before I actually get into describing in detail the ideas in the survey, let me spend some time talking about the current economic scenario. There has been a slowdown in the Indian economy. Part of it is because of the global economy itself slowing down. You see here the world, the advanced economies, the emerging economies, and all groups of countries have actually slowed down in 2019 when compared to the averages for 2014 to 2018. In a globalized economy, India has also felt that effect. But there is one important aspect on which I will delve into greater detail, which needs attention from the perspective of the Indian economy, which is the financial sector. This chart shows the share of corporate loans in non-fruit credit starting from 2007 to 2019. What is quite relevant here to notice is this boom and bust, with 2013 being the peak when the share of corporate loans reached their peak. After that, it has decreased. Now, what is the impact of this on investment? If you want to understand the impact of this on investment, we can do the following exercise, which is take a 10-year period, split it into two 5-year halves, look at the credit that a firm takes in the first 5 years, and then correlate it with the investment that the firm does in the next half. Now, if suppose the credit that they've taken actually is affecting investment negatively in the next 5-year period, then you should see a negative correlation with 2013 as being the break year. And that is the exercise that is being shown in the table. This is the result from regressions that we've run. What you see clearly is that it is indeed 2013 and the 10-year period from 2008 to 2017 where there is this negative correlation. In other words, firms that actually borrowed a lot more from 2008 to 2012 were indeed the firms that they also actually invested less from 2013 to 2017. Now, how does this affect GDP growth? As we had showed in the last economic survey on the virtuous cycle, the virtuous cycle originates from private investment, which affects economic growth with a lag, and thereby consumption, and that's how the virtuous cycle proceeds. Now, what is important here is what is being shown on the right, which is the correlation of investment with GDP growth, with both contemporaneously and with lags. I want you to pay particular attention to the one that is being shown with the arrow, which is the correlation with a 4-year lag, which is what is the impact on GDP growth this year due to the investment done 4 years back. That has a very strong positive correlation. If you look at the contemporaneous correlation, which is being shown in black, that is negative. Now, this is important for us to understand because as I just showed, the peak of the credit happened in 2013, and after that, there has been actually a decline in credit, which has affected investment as well. And it's that 4-year lag, as a result of which the slowdown in investment has led to the growth slide, starting from 2017 onwards. Now, it is in this context that we actually focus in this year's economic survey on the theme of wealth creation. Wealth is both a cause and an effect of investment, especially private investment. Therefore, it is important for us to focus on wealth creation. In this context, it is quite pertinent to go back and look at the history, the recorded economic history. This chart shows that for close to 3/4 of recorded economic history, India has been the dominant economic power in the world. So this chart goes from 180 to 2017. Obviously, the first 1,000 years are actually not up to scale. 2000 is being shown in a smaller period on the x-axis. But what is critical here is that for 3/4 of recorded economic history, India has been the dominant economic power. Such dominance does not happen by mere chance. Such dominance happens by design. And what is that element of design? It is indeed our emphasis on wealth. If you think about what our traditions say for the 4 noble human pursuits, which is dharma, arth, kam, moksha, arth is indeed about wealth. The canonical example, the canonical literature that is talked about is Arthashastra, but even many of our other ancient traditions also advocate wealth as wealth and wealth creation as indeed a noble pursuit. A very important piece of Tamil literature, which is the Tirukkural, talks about this in the chapter 76. Wealth, the lamp unfailing, speeds to every land, dispensing darkness at its Lord's command. Now, that is ancient thought, but how does that correlate with evidence that we have in recent times? To provide contemporary evidence on this, the exercise that we've done is to look at the top 100 entrepreneurs as measured using the Forbes list as of 2019, looked at the wealth that they've created over the last 10 years, applied necessary filters to ensure that the wealth was created in the right way, and correlated it with various other aspects of society. In this chart, what you see is that as there is an increase in the wealth created by our entrepreneurs, the largest entrepreneurs, the employees actually benefit as well from the salaries and the jobs that they get. A second dimension is those firms that supply to the firms of these entrepreneurs. And here, what is being shown is that the wealth created by these entrepreneurs benefits the suppliers as well because they end up supplying to these firms. A third way of looking at it is the foreign exchange revenue, which you all would understand matters for macro stability because those revenues affect our current account deficit and in turn macro stability. What you see here is that the wealth created by these entrepreneurs also correlates strongly with foreign exchange revenues. A final aspect is what goes to the citizen through the government as the taxes that are paid by these entrepreneurs. What is being shown here is the direct taxes paid by these entrepreneurs, which clearly is an underestimate because there are various other indirect taxes that are also paid. But what is important here is a strong correlation between the wealth created by these entrepreneurs and the direct taxes that are paid. Because, and this goes back to what the Honorable Prime Minister said in his Independence Day speech, unless wealth is created, it cannot be distributed. And for distribution, it's basically taxes that are the primary instrument. Now, as I had mentioned, that India dominated economic activity for 3/4 of known economic history, and that doesn't happen by accident, it requires design. So what is that element of the design that indeed led to such economic dominance? The economic survey posits that it is the combination of the invisible hand of the market supported by the hand of trust, which is what leads to wealth creation. And here, there are important pieces of literature which we actually quote from. Take, for instance, to support the idea of the invisible hand of the market from Arthashastra, which says the root of wealth is economic activity, and lack of it brings material distress. In the absence of fruitful economic activity, both current prosperity and future growth are in danger of destruction. In fact, the Arthashastra also commends the king to actually remove all obstacles to economic activity, which you would think about in contemporary times as economic freedom. If you look at the hand of trust, in the same chapter from which I quoted from the Tiruvalluvar says, wealth yields righteousness and joy, the wealth acquired capably without causing any harm, which is about the hand of trust. So now I'm going to provide evidence on these aspects. Before that, let me just mention that the economic survey, building on this idea that the combination of the invisible hand of the market has to be combined with the hand of trust, introduces this idea that trust is a public good which gets enhanced with greater use. Consider the example of water as a public good. As we use it more, it gets depleted. But the beauty about trust is that the more it gets used, the more the value of it gets enhanced. Of course, conversely, it's also true that if it does not get used, then the value of it declines as well. That's the characteristic of a public good, which gets enhanced with greater use. In trying to pursue wealth creation in the Indian economy, the economic survey brings out 10 main ideas, which is first, that wealth creation benefits all. The invisible hand of the market enables wealth creation. Trust is a public good that increases with use. Grassroots entrepreneurs, which we basically have evidence in the second chapter of the survey, using evidence from 504 districts in India, showing that grassroots entrepreneurs indeed create wealth in their districts. Pro-business policies, those that provide equal opportunity, are important for wealth creation. In order for wealth creation, it's also important to remove some of the anachronistic government interventions that have actually subsisted. Job creation, which is very important in the Indian context today, can be furthered significantly by integrating Assemble in India for the World into the Make in India campaign. The survey goes into great detail about how the ease of doing business can be enhanced by implementing specific suggestions to bring India within the first 50 in the rankings, in the World Bank's ease of doing business rankings. The survey highlights that the banking sector, when you compare the size of the economy, is at this point subscale, and that is something that we need to think about. Finally, in keeping with the spirit of making economics relate to the common person, the economic survey brings the idea of thalinomics, which is the economics of a plate of food in India. Let me give you some evidence about the role of the invisible hand of the market in generating wealth. Of course, India's GDP and GDP per capita have increased significantly after liberalization. In this chart, what is being shown is the wealth that is created from the perspective of the stock market. What is quite interesting to note here, what is being plotted, is every milestone that the Sensex achieved. 5,000 milestone. If you notice the first half, which is the phase 1 accelerated growth, while it took about 170 months for the first milestone of 5,000 to be reached, the subsequent milestones were reached much, much faster. And that's the first phase of accelerated growth. By the way, this is not just because of a scale effect. It is the increase in the growth rates that actually accounts for this acceleration. A second phase from 2007 to 2014, when it took about 80 months for the next milestone to be achieved. And then a third phase of revival again, where the milestones are being reached faster. Also notice that the last milestone from 35,000 to 40,000 has taken a little longer, which is actually also reflective of the slowdown in growth that we talked about. A few other examples, if you look at it from various sectors, this shows the banking sector. When the entry of private sector banks was allowed in the early 90s, look at the growth rate in the penetration of credit before and the penetration after. It's significantly higher. Similarly, another example, take the mutual fund sector, which when it was opened up in early 2000s by breaking up UTI, look at the growth rates before and after. Again, significant difference. Another way of looking at the same thing, the impact of economic freedom and openness on generating wealth, is to distinguish various sectors. Here, an apples-to-apples comparison is being made within the transport sector. Take an open sector like roads and contrast it with a closed sector like railways. And here what is being shown is the freight traffic. The freight traffic for the open sector increased at exponential rates, much higher than the closed sector, and this effect is even more pronounced when you look at it from the perspective of passenger traffic, where you again find the open sector increasing at much higher rate than the closed sector. So in sum, these and other evidences that are there in the first chapter clearly articulate that the invisible hand of the market really and openness enables actually growth not only at the aggregate level but also at the sectoral level. The other important pillar, as I just mentioned, is the hand of trust. If you look at the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, 2011 is when India actually was at its low. If you correlate that with a different way of looking at the same thing, which is there is a break here provided in 2011 when the report on the 2G spectrum allocation was brought out. If you look at it, what is clear here is that connected companies, which are basically which is the line that is shown in red, vis-a-vis those that actually, the purple line for the BSE Sensex, before 2011, the connected companies actually earned much higher returns. But then there is a scissor-like movement after 2011 with the same connected companies earning lower returns since then. This is an important aspect because it relates to trust in the system and the difference between the pro-business policies that enable opportunity versus pro-crony policies that can favor incumbents, which is the Chapter 3 of the Economic Survey. Another way of showing the same thing is the quality of financial statements. The Reserve Bank of India had, pointed out some of the large defaulters. What this chart shows is the financial statement quality of these large defaulters, 11 of them, by comparing it with the median financial statement quality in 3 years, 2012, 2013, and 2014, the median level, which captures basically what is the level of financial statement quality for the average firm, vis-a-vis that for these 11 large defaulters. And what is very clear is that even in 2012 to 2014, these indicators of financial statement quality were giving some signs. And it is important in the context of trust to actually keep in mind that when there are large firms whose financial statements are not as dependable, then it creates a trust deficit for other firms as well, because the average investor then starts thinking about the financial statement quality of every firm. A different way of looking at the same thing is by looking at the wealth erosion by willful defaulters, which is being compared with some of the large subsidy heads in the budget. One way of saying this is that if this money were not lost, we have been spending almost double on our social sector, which benefits the common person. For instance, if you look at the health, education, and social protection, the spending that is done is almost the same as that for willful defaulters. Or if this money possibly had been spent on improving the capital, if this hadn't been lost, it could have possibly been spent on capital expenditures in the railways, which again benefits the common person by enabling that person better travel. I was actually talking about telltale signs, for willful defaulters. Here what is being done is the comparison between willful defaulters versus non-defaulters in the top panel, and willful defaulters versus distressed defaulters in the bottom panel. And here, if you look at in terms of the disclosure of related party transactions, the promoter holding that is pledged, or the loans that are given to related parties, clearly willful defaulters differ significantly from either non-defaulters or distressed defaulters. And these are signs that actually, again, important, which I'll come back to later. One other way of looking at this is the way, take one particular bank that has actually declared a particular borrower as a defaulter, and does another bank reflect the same? This, if you see, from 2014 onwards till 2019, this has secularly increased, which is consistent with the cleanup of the banking system that has happened over the last 5 years. Now let me spend some time on the important instruments for wealth creation that we must rely on. This chart here shows the widespread new firm creation that is happening at the level of districts in India. Think about the movie Band Baja Barat, where this protagonist, Shruti Kakkad, actually says that, "Main India ki best wedding planner banungi." It looks like from this map, clearly, that there are many, many Shrutis like that all over the districts in India.